You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Cinna with today's discussion. Parents are to blame if children view porn online. Google's public policy analyst says it's the responsibility of parents to keep their children safe online. Naomi Gummer also says it's a myth that laws are able to protect young people from internet pornography. Her comments come as the UK government is pushing for an opt-out scenario. It means that if you switch to a new internet provider, you will need to decide if you want access to adult content or not. And you can't get online without deciding. It's a fresh step to protect younger children from hardcore material, but the move is controversial. Pornography companies say they already restrict content to adults, and others are worried about the free nature of the internet. Joining me is Jim Killock from the Open Rights Group. Miranda Suit is founder of Safermedia UK. Julie Bindel is a feminist activist and writer. And Anna Span is an adult film producer. I'll start with you, Julie Bindel, feminist activist and writer. What is the harm in pornography? What is happening online?
There's much harm in pornography. Women, men and children are harmed. Much of the pornography that we see is a depiction of sexual violence towards women. Many women, of course, consent to be in the industry, but that doesn't detract from the fact that much of it is a depiction of the nastiest, most brutal sexual violence. It creates a context in which women are viewed as enjoying being hurt and being harmed. And in a culture where there is endemic sexual violence towards women and children and men, I think that that's where the harm lies. But
we do see pornography where women are in control. It's not always where the woman is submitting.
Of course. I mean, there are many types of pornography. The concern that I have is the way that pornography is now leading technology, the way that sex is becoming commodified and commercialised to an extent that it is removing the reality from sexual contact. And I believe that the more distant young men and young women become from each other as human beings, the more that they rely on pornography to become a sex educator, then the less value we have in each other as human beings, and the more we start to dehumanise women and girls and see them as sexual objects.
Anna Span, you're an adult film producer. How damaging is pornography? We're looking at children having access to porn and the impact it has on them. If a young child gets access to this kind of material, which is freely available, the effect that it's going to have on them when they grow up, their view of sex, their view of body image.
Well, the first thing to understand is the industry doesn't market to underage people. You can imagine there are extremely strict rules about that. And we think we're happy to work with the Adult Industry Trade Association, work with the government, as long as it doesn't impede on our ability to sell to adults. We need to be able to sell to adults. And, you know, if you were talking about alcohol and access to alcohol by underage people, you would be talking about putting in specific laws around young people. You wouldn't be threatening everybody with a censored, experience to alcohol.
Sure.
And we
Julie,
think
how damaging is this for children? Children are getting access to this. We know that some young children are getting access to it, but also maybe teenagers that are legally getting access to it. How is it skewing their thoughts of relationships, of sex, and of women?
The majority,
well, I tell you something.
I was asked the question, Anna.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
The majority of young people are now becoming sexually educated through pornography, which gives a skewed vision of relationships between girls and boys, men and women, between gay men, between lesbians. It relies on submission and dominance. It relies on the relationship between sexual excitement and harm and hurt, and masochism and sadism. And so therefore young people are not being able to explore consensual, healthy sexual relationships. They're relying on the messages, the misogynistic messages that porn promotes. And, you know, Anna Arrowsmith was talking about her website, We Consent, which has a link to a Penn and Teller video, a film, where these men humiliate and sexually harass anti-pornography feminists within this film.
But
and that
we're looking at
strikes
the
me.
effect of children here. You're saying it gives them a skewed view of sex. Anna, would you agree with that?
No, we don't have the proof that that is the case as yet. And in fact, there's a lot of different ideas about how young kids are actually seeing internet sex and whether that's actually changed over time. You must remember that back in the day, there was porn in the household. There were DVDs, there were magazines. If you talk to people in their 30s, 40s, they say they first came across porn in, their father's or their uncle's stash or whatever. That was in the house. Those markets have fallen away, and what we now have is mainly online presence, and online presence only. So as long as companies that are selling people software in order to stop their kids from seeing pornography are doing the job that they should be. I mean, the emphasis and the moral panic should be on those companies that are selling you something, a false sense of security, for something that is obviously not working, and nobody's pointing the finger of blame to them. But the thing is, for instance, the Crimes Against Children Research Centre at the University of New Hampshire came out and found that actually the age for first seeing pornography has stayed at 14, because that's the age, one, when kids start to be more sexually interested, but also they're capable of getting around the software. So if they haven't got magazines in the house, if they haven't got DVDs, you can't suddenly say a before and after scenario.
A reminder that you're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Cinna with today's discussion. Joining me is Jim Killock from the Open Rights Group. Miranda Suit is founder of Safermedia UK. Julie Bindel is a feminist activist and writer. And Anna Span is an adult film producer. Miranda Suit, founder of Safermedia UK. How do we stop children seeing these sex scenes?
Well, first of all, can I just say that there's lots of evidence that there's massive harm to children, because, what we've heard so far from Anna is that probably it's not much of a problem, but in fact it's the therapeutic community who've been driving all the debates that are going on in Parliament at the moment on this. It was a year-long inquiry by a cross-party group of MPs about children online who came up and said, actually, it's far worse than we thought. We've got 1 in 3 10-year-olds who are seeing pornography, so I don't know where the 14-year-old figure has come from. We've got 80% of young teens who are actually also going online and looking for pornography. And the therapeutic community is saying we've got an explosion in teenagers who are addicted to pornography, and it's through online porn. And obviously all the other porn still exists, Anna. It's very, very powerful also. But we've got to, in this debate, look at the priority. The priority is children. The priority is internet pornography, because what our experts said is it's very, very perverse, it's very perverted, it's very violent, it's very degrading. It's nothing like the average, say, person of 40 thinks that they saw 20 years ago. It's far more perverse than that.
What are your worries of the effect that it will have on children?
Well,
when they grow up, because we don't know this yet.
As I've already said, addiction, and pornography addiction is a very unpleasant business. You begin to lose interest in real human beings if you do come across a real member of the opposite sex. And we've already heard this set of teenage boys that their first actual, sexual encounter with a real girl, they're tending to be rough because they see rough sex, and that's putting it mildly on the internet. That's mainstream. And so also that there's a problem with actually having faithful relationships. There's a problem with also socialising in general. People who watch a lot of internet porn tend to become very isolated. So I don't think there's any doubt in the therapeutic community, and let's get this straight, we're talking about therapists, we're talking about the leading London clinic on this issue, saying that 25% of their referrals are young teenagers who are addicted to pornography.
And how do we protect them now?
Right, if you now we go on to protect them.
Sorry, just let Anna reply to that. Go on, Anna.
But that's a self-selecting sample. This is the trouble when you get people that are very politically motivated to fight and go to the government. It's the person that really wants to fight for it that wins. It doesn't matter whether it's facts. If you're talking about analysts, you're talking about the very small minority of people who have had behavioural problems bad enough to go and have it talked about. You're not talking about the 99% of young people who are perfectly capable of being able to frame it within a perfect relationship with other women, and their mothers, their sisters. They know lots of women, and they know women aren't like
Sure.
that.
Anna, can it ever be good for young people to see this? Can they ever learn anything good from it? We've been hearing so far that it's having a bad view on how they see women and how they view sex. But can they ever learn anything good from it?
Well, I don't know about young people specifically, but I tell you what porn does. It democratises the body and the imagination. The actual porn industry, and I don't mean the porn industry that's represented through mainstream television or mainstream magazines, because they have their own prism of, the perfect body that they see it through. 50% of the industry is very successfully amateur. And I always say to women, whatever you dislike about your body, put it into Google and put plus porn, and you will find a load of websites that think that is the most attractive thing about you.
Jim, what are your thoughts? How do we protect children from getting access to this material?
Assuming that that's what adults want to do, and I think that's, a big question for adults. They've got to decide exactly where they want to draw the lines. And I would assume that most parents would want some control over what their children, particularly younger children, see online. And they certainly should be talking to their children about what they do and don't see online. That's completely a question for those adults. And I think actually the question we've got is, who takes responsibility here? Is it about parents taking responsibility for their children and looking at what they can do? Or is this something that internet service providers and others start taking responsibility for? Because that's actually the question, the debate that we're having at the moment.
Who do you think it is then? Who takes responsibility?
It has to be the parents. And the reason I say that is because, not to say that internet service providers can't, for instance, help parents by providing tools or parental control software. But what is very, very disturbing about this debate is that what Claire Perry and others have said is that they want internet service providers to start doing network blocking. So they're actually saying that in order to protect children, they want national censorship software installed across all internet service providers, which can then be repurposed for more or less anything. And that's where we've got ourselves into a very dangerous situation.
So you're worried about the slippery slope argument. Once it's in place, it could be broadened then?
Well, it's partly a slippery slope question, yes. If you've got censorship software installed at networks, then yes, the government can decide to ban whatever it likes, at a flick of a switch, more or less, because it's had the switch installed. But it also is a question about what these blocks then do. I mean, we have these blocks on mobile phones at the moment. It's a default regime, it's a network block. The mobile phones decide what is adult and what is not, and it isn't just pornography.
A reminder that you're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Cinna with today's discussion. Joining me is Jim Killock from the Open Rights Group. Miranda Suit is founder of Safermedia UK. Julie Bindel is a feminist activist and writer. And Anna Span is an adult film producer. We hear stories of parents who are lax with their passwords, who may not really control what their children do. They're happy to sign them up to social networking sites when they're not of age. Can we really rely on parents to do this?
Well, actually, it's a better solution than network blocking, because network blocking is extremely easy to get round. So if the parents aren't taking responsibility for how the computers work, the children can get round it in extremely simple ways. So really what we've got is a politicised debate saying, let's do network blocking, when anybody who actually looks at it sensibly will know that A, it doesn't work, and B, it's handing huge power over to the government.
Anna Span, network blocking is not necessarily the solution. Do you agree?
Oh, it definitely isn't the solution. Like I said, if you want to stop children seeing pornography, shut down those massive, like RedTube and places like that, who are giving it out to kids for free.
What are you guys actually doing to stop children having access to these sex scenes? What have you got in place to make sure that they're not getting access to it?
I have, on my website, we just have small trailers that are very, very fastly edited with not particularly hardcore images on them, and you have to put a credit card in, so you have to be over 18 to go through to see the full film.
Miranda Suit, you're shaking your head here. Is that
I'm
not good enough for
shaking my
you?
head because you're listening to someone who's making money out of pornography at the expense of my children. We've just had a cross-party. It's not a political debate. It's been a cross-party study that have said that there's massive harm. They've said there's a good way of protecting children. It's not censorship across the board. I don't know why there's this hysteria from various people, because what would happen is you would come in, everything would be default setting pornography off, but if you prove you're over 18, then you get it turned back on with just one click of the switch. But what it's doing is it's protecting the most vulnerable in our society. A society's judged by how it treats its most vulnerable and weak, our children. Let's protect them.
So what do you want in place then? You don't want
We
this?
want this opt-in system, which has just been mentioned. You have the default setting of pornography off, coming in from the ISPs. It's already being done on child pornography, that's child abuse images. It's done democratically by the Internet Watch Foundation, and then somebody who's over 18 goes through a process to get it turned back on. So over 18s can have all the porn they want.
What
We're
about
talking about
non-tech-savvy
protecting our
parents?
children.
A lot of kids are more
This is
tech-savvy.
exactly the point. This is exactly
I'll
the
come back to you after
point.
this,
Exactly
Jim.
the point. For the ones who are not tech savvy, the internet pornography will be turned off to start with as the default setting. Then if they want to get it turned back on, they go through a verification process. But the point is that children, basically, when they go online and in public places as well, they will not be bombarded immediately by pornography if they're under 18.
Jim
They
Killock,
don't get
open.
that already. But also look at how that's
Sure,
gonna
Anna,
affect-
I'm just going to go to Jim first. He wanted a reply first. I'll come to you straight afterwards.
I mean, you're right. This does already happen on mobile networks. And what we've been doing is asking people when they come across incorrect blocks to start reporting it. And we find incredibly large numbers of sites blocked, which are just got absolutely nothing to do with pornography. For instance, a church in Sheffield had their site blocked. And why? Because they mentioned sex and started talking about why sexualization, shouldn't be taking place. We had we had things like political blogs, number of anti-censorship campaigns, all kinds of things get blocked. And this is because it's about identifying sites by keywords. So what we're saying, by putting in default blocks, is saying, well, if you as an adult haven't, if you run a website anywhere in the world, you might be blocked. We don't really care about your sites. We don't really care about your access to the adult population. And if you as an adult want to actually get a censorship-free web service and be able to find completely nothing to do with pornography websites, if you actually want to be able to get hold of that material, then you're going to have to tell your internet service provider that you want pornography, and then be on a list of people.
But we can't
that want
expect parents to
pornography.
sit over children all the time and check every single website.
There are really simple things that you can do which will work as an adult who's got children. If you've got a child under 10 and you're relying on or under 12 and you're relying on default blocking, then you are being deeply irresponsible, because if you are concerned about that, because the default settings on these sorts of blocks, what they do, they don't block things like double click, the big advertising networks, because if they did, they would block lots of legitimate advertising and cause all kinds of concerns.
So
but
what do you want
serves
done
out-
then?
You have to get the parents to do the work. Now, I'm not saying
You
that
really
is
expect parents to sit down in the evening when they've come back from work just to sit and watch over their child over the screen, whatever age they are?
They can. There are ways of installing software. There are all kinds of things that can be done, but I think ISPs have a role in working with parents. But the idea of putting on default blocking and then assuming that's done the job, I mean, it is really irresponsible, because what will happen is lots of parents will think the job has been done, and then lo and behold, they'll find that their kids are looking on Google search, they're installing all kinds of circumvention tools, they'll be just be served pornographic material through things like DoubleClick, purely because because that can't be blocked because it's doing too many things, or you simply use HTTPS connections, the sort of thing that Anna will be using for her credit card service. If she turns on HTTPS for her whole website, then it avoids the blocks as well, because they can't be blocked by default blocks because that's encrypted. So they're a really, really stupid solution that will do a lot of damage to a lot of sites, and that will cause a lot of pain for a lot of adults, as well as forcing adults to declare whether that if they want censorship-free internet, that actually they're in favour and want to get adult material. And again, I think that is an unpleasant thing to make adults do.
A reminder that you're listening to the Voice of Russia in London. I'm Daniel Cinna with today's discussion. Joining me is Jim Killock from the Open Rights Group. Miranda Suit is founder of Safermedia UK. Julie Bindel is a feminist activist and writer. And Anna Span is an adult film producer. Julie Bindel, what is your proposition for this? How do we protect children?
Well, I don't think censorship is the solution, because I think all kinds of things will be censored, such as, educational material about women's health, about positive sexuality. There is nothing wrong with sex. There is nothing wrong with exploring sexuality. What I'm concerned about is the amount of hatred that boys are having instilled into them about girls and women through porn.
How do we protect
what
them
we
from
need
these
to do?
sites?
We need legislation that isn't about censorship, because I agree that wouldn't work. We need something which is akin to our incitement to racial hatred legislation, which would be an incitement to sexual hatred and sexual violence, because the crimes against women and children that we see in pornography are real. They're happening to real women and real children, and we should be able to legislate against inciting further sexual hatred by making that the norm.
So what do you want the law to say? You don't want to block, and you don't want parents to sit there. What do you want the law to say?
Of course, I agree, it's parents' responsibility. I don't think that that's going to work, however, in the long run, because you can't sit over a child and you can't watch them the whole time.
Right, so you've got Julie's law. What does your law say?
No, it's not. It's actually very parallel to incitement to racial hatred, which we already have. We recognise that it is against the law to incite hatred towards ethnic minorities, towards lesbians and gay people, etc. Why can't we have that about sexual hatred? Much of pornography is a depiction of the sexual hatred of women, and that's why we need this legislation.
It isn't, though. That's an incredibly subjective opinion by somebody who comes from an anti-porn position. But I tell you what porn does that doesn't get advertised enough. It democratises the body and the imagination. Suddenly you have all sorts of different things that people are trying out, and they're taking it, they're imagining it and they're seeing it on porn and they like it, and it keeps their relationships alive. Now, with young people, we're not arguing that young people should have free access, easy access. In fact, we are saying to the government, the only thing you can do is shut down these free porn sites that hand out free copywritten stuff that the government, so it's stolen copyrights, but these hub sites. And if the government did that, that would actually stop kids getting hold of it. I mean, people use power in their sex lives regardless of pornography. They have always done that. They've always enjoyed ways of, role-playing, spicing things up. Porn merely reflects that. And it's actually, there's this very naive argument going throughout the anti-porn argument that somehow there's an authentic, real sex life that happened before the internet, this sort of, this dreaming of a history that actually never existed, and that pornography has kind of, ruined it all and tainted it. The fact is that porn is as real as some people's sex lives, and some people's sex lives are far more bizarre than a lot of pornography. A lot of pornography is mundane, and so to say that by default that you can say like it's a drug, or you can that people can definitely get addicted to it. Well, you talk about addiction. Well, what about everyone going on the internet? People think how you can't live without the internet now. Why don't we talk about that in terms of addiction? Because it's not, it's not useful politically to do so.
Sure, Miranda, so you wanted to reply to Anna?
I did. I mean, we're talking about harm to children. We're talking about regulation. We have magazines on top shelves in newsagents. We have the British Board of Film Classification. We have a watershed on the TV. Why are we having a Wild West on the internet? Why are we saying that that's normal? And it not to the extent. This is the problem. Never before did you have this going into children's bedrooms. 10-year-old children, a third of our children.
If that's your concern, why don't you make it a law? Why don't you propose a law for it to be an offence for adults not to have installed software that protects their children?
Because we've got a much simpler process, which is going to still leave all this stuff available to over 18s. Why is everybody so worried about having a default setting, but over 18s get it all turned back on again? Fantastic.
Because then couples will have to have the very difficult conversation. There are a lot of men out there that are using pornography because they're bridging a gap between their libido,
No,
and they don't want to have that discussion with their wife.
And it's much worse than that. If you as an adult want to visit a church in Sheffield, then apparently you're going to have to tell your partner that you want pornography, and then you're going to be on a list of people that have said that they want pornography that's kept at your internet service provider, and your internet service provider has then got censorship tools that the government can then apply to whatever it likes in the future. You've just effectively, because of child safety, you've induced the government to introduce national censorship tools that can be applied to any kind of content automatically, and it will be, because we've had these discussions over Twitter, we've had these discussions over Facebook, we've had, all kinds of material is constantly under pressure for censorship, and once the tools are there, they will be used.
The important phrase is because of child safety. We're doing a lot of things because of child safety. We are actually putting seatbelts in the back of cars, we're regulating drugs, we're regulating alcohol. Why can't we regulate this? This is people's future relationships.
Everybody's happy with the idea of regulation. The question is where you place it. When you place regulation of content at critical sort of in internet service providers, what you're doing is you're providing a bottleneck for any abusive government to use in whatever way you want. Whereas if you're persuading parents, or even telling parents that they have to install the equivalent of child safety features on their computers, and that's a legal responsibility, you want to go down that route, fine. But if you make it the responsibility of centralised networks as opposed to individuals, whatever that responsibility is, that's the point where you've handed huge power to people I simply would not trust.
Okay,
Miranda, Jim's concern here is that obviously this could go too far. If you end up blocking things, you could end up blocking legitimate websites, and he's not happy to do that at the expense of freedom, to protect children at the expense of freedom. How could we possibly follow your idea without it going too far?
Because what would happen is, once the system got going, you would have whitelists, and Jim is fully aware of whitelists. Just as happens at the moment with the child pornography, the child abuse sites that are blocked. If stuff is blocked in error, it goes to the Internet Watch Foundation, they put it on a whitelist. This is being done in companies all across the country. If companies don't want their employees accessing material which is going to distract them from their work, they actually have exactly this type of block put in, and it is refined over a period of time.
Okay, very quickly, Jim, is that good enough for you, a whitelist?
It's appalling. I mean, basically we're saying that, governments, ISPs, all kinds of people are going to now start making choices about what can and cannot be seen, and we're just going to have some huge sort of...
but that is regulating what's porn and what's not porn for children.
Well, these tools can be placed wherever you like, and the effective way to do it, if you're worried about children as opposed to just want censorship, then the place to do this is on computers. The further you get away from somebody's computer, the less effective these tools get. Like, if you install actual blocks and whitelists and all the rest of it, you do that on somebody's device, computer, whatever, you've got a fair chance of actually getting those blocks to work. If you do it on your router, no, that's quite easy to bypass. You do it on an ISP's network, it's incredibly easy to bypass.
Okay,
can we talk about public opinion? In the UK, that 2/3 of the people in this country, many of them parents, want this block put on. That's the latest survey done in the last 2 days, and I agree with them, for the children of this country.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thanks to my guest, Jim Killock from the Open Rights Group, Miranda Suit, founder of Safermedia UK, Julie Bindel is a feminist activist and writer, and Anna Span is an adult film producer.
This is the Voice of Russia. The London Bureau of the Voice of Russia is now live on digital radio and online, with news, comment and debate on weekdays between 4 and 7 p.m.